Hello and welcome again to Why Fight, a conference on politics and ideology in militaries and armed groups, organized by the UCD Centre for War Studies. The papers in this session will examine the activities and motivations of paramilitaries. We often think of war as the business of standing armies, but a lot of armed conflict actually involves men and women who are not regular soldiers. This panel will examine the role of paramilitary groups in extending or limiting the reach of organized state power. Our next speaker is Tinashe Chikafa. Tinashe is an MA student in security studies at Sussex University. A paper he is presenting today has been co-authored with Dr. Joshua Chakawa of Midland State University in Zimbabwe. Our paper considers the strategic logic behind the deployment of paramilitary formations by the Rhodesian colonial authorities during Zimbabwe's War of Liberation. Paramilitaries of various kinds have remained active in post-colonial Zimbabwe. Examining the rationale behind their deployment, therefore, has contemporary relevance for security policy.
Good day to you all. I'm standing in for Dr. Chikawa, who is my co-author. My name is Tinashe Chikafa, and I'm here to present on our paper titled Militias and Counterinsurgency in Zimbabwe's Liberation War. In this paper, we start to address several key issues surrounding the use of militias in war. Firstly, we wanted to expand on the knowledge base of the history of Zimbabwe, especially that of select forces of the Rhodesian military machinery that had been left out by both historiographies. The second major justification for writing this paper was based on us trying to widen the understanding of the tactical and strategic use of militias in military and political circles. Our theoretical understanding of the use of militias was largely based on understanding, or rather trying to understand, how regime security theory can not only be described by the proliferation of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, but also other means which use or utilize arms and force. In general, regime security is concerned with proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the protection of the elites in power against impending military and political threats. However, with the Rhodesian scenario, the proliferation of advanced weaponry against the guerrilla army was a bit difficult to implement because of the guerrilla strategy itself, which is non-conventional. As such, the proliferation of men skilled in the use of arms who are also expandable seemed the proper tactic to ensure the regime's security was maintained. Resultantly, the paper further highlights how this theory extends beyond the ruling elite themselves, but to also other interested political contenders in a war zone whereby they amass arms and men in a bid to secure a particular place, its electorate, and the electoral vote that may bring them to power as well. The rationale that drove this study lie in the fact that militias have often been left out in major historical debates and records, especially when looking at the Zimbabwean military history. Most of the Rhodesian army units have little to no significant history that has been written on because of the historiography that exists. Largely, people have resorted to writing off Zanla, Zipra, as well as the Rhodesian security forces, elite units such as the Selous Scouts, the Grey Scouts, the Commandos, the Rhodesian African Rifles, and little exists when it comes to literature that relates to the guard force as well as the security forces auxiliaries. We found it fitting to do a study to try and understand the use of militias And amongst the major themes that we explored was that the major reasons behind the employment of militias, just like in other conflicts that had happened in Mozambique as well as in Vietnam, as the paper illustrated, was that the first major rationale for employing the security force auxiliaries was due to their expendability. Security force auxiliaries did not belong to a formal, or were rather not a formal military unit. They could be disbanded, as we see in the paper when the government had to do away with a unit which had become rogue. At the same time, because the military had become overwhelmed due to the operational zones that the guerrilla armies were opening up in Rhodesia, they found it fitting that a militia unit could reduce the strain on conventional military forces of the Rhodesian security forces, and thus implemented this tactical unit. The second foremost point would be that the employment of security force auxiliaries was because of a need to restructure the civil-military relations that had now been in existence since the intensification of the Liberation War from 72 to 1976. At times, the military, due to their loss of ground coverage and intelligence gathering capabilities, there were reports that some people were manhandled by the military forces in need of intelligence. And this, instead of helping the military, actually damaged the military because people resorted to lying and giving false intelligence, which put their men on the line. In so doing, the introduction of a militia unit, which drew its conscripts from within the a certain or particular society, meant that these people were men in uniform whom the people knew and understood and could not abuse them. Hence, it was more of a psychological operations campaign which was meant to restructure the civil-military relations existing at the time. The third point that we bring out is that employing militias was meant to destabilize guerrilla support base as well as its recruitment drive. By enacting an amnesty policy during the end of the war, it meant that they rather thought that the men who had joined ZANLA as well as ZIPRA would leave and come and swell the ranks of the security force auxiliaries, but this did not happen. Instead, many of the people that composed the unit would come from urban areas or convicts who saw it fit to join a unit rather than spend an entire lifetime in a prison system. Hence, these were major aspects that led to the formation of this special unit. But then the major question that one may ask would be to try and understand if militias were able to secure a regime in power like we tried to locate it using the regime security theory. Our understanding is that to a larger extent, militias did not achieve their overall objective of trying to protect a regime in power and make it stay in power. What they did was to facilitate a stay in power for some time, as well as ease the duties that the military were carrying out everywhere as the fronts were being opened on a daily basis. Hence, the militias did not completely achieve their set objective, but instead they sustained a system which was on the brink of collapse for 2 or more years in our understanding. Thank you.